From making cable television history with the biggest series debut, to controversial plot choices that kept the fan base from growing, here's a look into exactly how The Walking Dead wrecked its once successful franchise. Over a decade ago, when The Walking Dead first aired, it killed it at the box office. With 5.35 million viewers streaming in to watch the pilot episode, the show made history with the biggest series debut AMC had ever seen. But something went quite wrong over the years, as the show hardly ever comes up in discussions anymore. Towards the end, the viewership had dropped so low, it was embarrassing. Rick and the company's adventures at the Herschel farm during Season 2 may have been the point where the downfall began, but after Season 5, it all went to absolute crap. Sudden shifts in the format of the show and poor attempts at spicing up the storytelling arcs led to a terribly organized season. You'd think the showrunners were straight up running wild experiments after a while. It looked like they hadn't bothered putting a single damn thought into how the sequence of events should pan out. After scattering the group of survivors into a billion tiny pieces, we find episodes where they entirely focused on one subgroup, only to completely ignore them for the next bunch of episodes. I mean, how do they expect us to follow all the hundreds of separate stories without forgetting the details, and maybe even the plot of each one? Spreading yourself too thin has never worked out before. With such a massive cast, I understand the need to divide them up occasionally, but you can't do that all the time. It's going to become hella repetitive. And speaking of repetition, what's with this textbook formula they follow in both the show's overarching story and in individual character plotlines? There's always the theme of the group going somewhere new, meeting a new villain, and then, yeah, you guessed it, going to war. But for character development, they stick to all the basics. People gotta learn the value of human life, undergo pain, and suffer in isolation to finally get some sort of an epiphany. In a show that's literally about people turning into zombies, I get that they need to put this arc of a character struggling and facing the reality that they gotta kill a zombified loved one. Trust me, I get it. It couldn't have been a show about the undead otherwise. But the writers keep dragging out this trope and pretending it's a brand new thought, and then expect us to just play along. It's bound to get annoying sooner than later. Unfortunately, that isn't even the only trope they're holding on to for dear life. There's always that one idiot with no basic survival instincts who gets killed. Then there's the old frustrating plot device of having a random army of zombies just pop out of thin air to chase Rick's group whenever they need to escape a location. It's been years of people making fun of this, but it's like the writers just can't seem to get the hint. Lousy scripts are what ruined the show for so many of us. Each season, the characters will cook up some new ultimate scheme for salvation, and each season, it turns out to be a load of crap. Humans really aren't that resilient, to be very honest, and even if you overlook this silly repetitive storyline, it's impossible to let go of Rick's unbelievable character development. The man's stuck in an infinite loop of the same struggles and can't seem to make up his mind. He was a good cop before the apocalypse, used to save lives. So I understand it being difficult initially, but OMG, season after season, we see him unable to accept the reality that there's no way around the fact that he's got to kill those walkers to survive. A delusional man with a terrible savior complex. But one of the biggest mistakes the show made was the ill-timed and poorly executed deaths. To start off with the most infuriating examples of them all, the Season 6 finale showed Negan having most of Rick's group lined up on their knees, ending the season with him promising to kill one of them. Sure, the ploy may have worked at the moment, as the Season 7 premiere had a huge viewership, but just as instantly, the show's fame tanked. What kicked off that mass withdrawal in viewership was the horrible decision to faithfully stick to the graphic novel series the show's based on. The scenes showed the extremely violent murders of fan-favorite characters Abraham and Glenn, which left the fan base in shock. While it's true the show has never shied away from all the gore and terror, it wasn't the smartest decision to be that loyal to the source material. This time, they didn't hold back any of the gore from the comic, which is naturally much more disgusting when acted out in real life. Those nauseous, gut-wrenching scenes put off a large majority of the audience who gave up on the show altogether. What's upsetting is that Glenn, who's been around since the first day, would die in such a random way. After fans spent years following his story closely, his death made no sense in terms of where it was placed in the story. For the show to lose over 6 million viewers in a matter of 5 episodes says a lot about the content. Sadly, over time, the hatred for the show only grew more intense. Other characters with quite a lot of potential were killed off before they could even explore it. Don't take my word for it. Just look at Sadiq, Jesse, and Sophia. I wish I could say otherwise, but poor creative decisions don't end there. As long as Scott M. Gimple was the showrunner, the plots felt like they were running on autopilot. He completely lost sight of where the show was headed, and time and again prioritized shocks over substance. Fans were also tired of constantly being jerked around. A ridiculous arc showed them being eaten alive by the zombies, only to later reveal he survived by crawling under the dumpster. What was twisted was the fact that they didn't even bother building an actual mystery around that story. Instead of it having any value, it was all a poor tactic, used with the intention to actually fool the audience. They pivoted the camera angles in such a way as to make it look like Glenn had his insides pulled out of him, as he screamed in total despair, when really, they were from another corpse entirely. Did the showrunners take us for fools? We'll just sit around to be pranked by their poor gimmicky plots. In what universe did they think this would sit well with fans? Maybe it would have been fine if it had been used just that once, but no. Like every other part of the show, they had to repeat it again and make it all 10 times worse. That unforgivable cliffhanger where Negan beats someone's head in during the season 6 finale, placed simply to deploy that camera angle bullshit again to hide the actual truth. Cliffhangers, if done right, can definitely be a great tool to ensure people keep coming back for more. No doubt about that, but The Walking Dead took it too far. It felt forced and just plain wrong. The season 6 finale really was a cursed episode for the entire franchise. If it all had to come down to one factor as to why the franchise got ruined, it's the timing. The timing of cliffhangers, deaths, and departures, to be more specific. Carl's exit and Maggie's absence, and all those fake deaths that left fans fuming. And rightfully so. Remember how long they dragged Rick's fake death when he fell into a horde of walkers, only to have them cop out in the end. 3 long episodes. What a drag. The pace of the stories is a constant issue throughout the show. Even when the plot is an absolute banger, they drag it out to the point where it becomes a pain in the ass. They had us following Rick and his conflict with Negan for so long, when there were so many other great characters who got the short end of the stick. The amount of filler episodes that did absolutely nothing for the bigger picture is insane. It took Rick nearly 2.5 seasons to take down Negan, and in the end, it was painfully anticlimactic. There are also quite a lot of controversial issues with the show that keeps viewership from rising. People of color rarely make an appearance, and when they do, they're all out of focus. Just look at T-Dog, Bob, Tyrese, and Noah. The show also unnecessarily uses the idea of sexual assault often, and I get that it's a dark show, but it's how they handle it as a complete joke that's really problematic. So, from controversial plot choices keeping new fans at bay, to the show initially being television cable history's biggest series debut, this was exactly how The Walking Dead wrecked its once successful franchise.